the conference. If you can use the chat feature, you can ask questions. We'll have some of our team members reviewing that, and they will be reading the questions aloud during the Q&A. We're expecting a pretty sizable crowd, so we didn't want to have people talking over each other, and we figured it would be easier this way. So if you have a question at any time during the presentation, you can feel free to add it in the chat, and it will be monitored. Again, I wanted to give a thank you out to the CDO team that helped organize this event. Special thanks to Major Sullivan, Senior Master Sergeant Kogel, Ms. Lindsay Mask, and of course, Ms. Vidrine, our Chief Data Officer. I wanted to go ahead and introduce Ms. Vidrine. I believe she is on the call, and she is going to do the opening statement. Ma'am, are you available? Okay, if you guys would hold for just one moment, let me see if I can get a hold of her. Okay, so it looks like
I'm asking the address where you're currently at.
I used it as an experiment. That's the new police car. Last night.
Sorry, everyone. Could we get you to go ahead and mute yourself? I think we just unmuted everybody on accident. Ms. Vidrine, are you available? Can you hear? Okay, everyone, I apologize. If you give us just one moment, we're having some technical issues with the sound. We will resolve that just momentarily.
Ms. King, can you hear me? Oh, we gotta go.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, excellent. So thank you for your patience, folks. Good afternoon. My name is Eileen Vidrine, and I currently have the honor to serve as the Chief Data Officer for the Department of the Air Force. And today is really about highlighting some great work across the Department of Defense in the area of data. As many of us have gone on our data leadership journey over the last few years, there are some really pockets of excellence that are really starting to shine across not just the Air Force but the Department of Defense. And so the idea of Innovate Connect is to bring bring our community together so that people can actually share and leverage the lessons learned, so that every single time we start a new data project, we're not starting from ground zero, but we're building based on some of the great work that's been done to date, and that will give us better velocity as we move forward, as we work to meet the intent of the National Defense Strategies, leveraging data as a strategic asset. Today we have two really great projects, initiatives that have happened in the recent one. The first one is going to be Project UNACORN, and the other one is a use case done in partnership with the Air Force Insider Threat Office. So today I would like to introduce Ms. Rafi Doyle, who is the C5ISR Distinguished Engineer and Senior Scientific Technical Manager for the Naval Information Warfare Center Pacific. She has expertise in combat systems, and that has built on the U.S. Air Force operational tours as a Air Weapons Officer and a Joint Interface Control Officer. She has extensive background in technical data links, which is really important as we move forward in JADC2, T&E, and most recently as the Center's Integrated Fire Strategic Initiative Lead. She was coordinating the Naval Warfare Information Center Pacific's efforts on cross NRD&E and distributed live, virtual, and constructive experimentation. She began her career with SPA Pacific in 2007 as a joint test and evaluation project lead. Today, she leads Project UNACORN for the Digital Warfighter Office at Navy. Prior to joining NAWIC Pacific in 2007, she served as a United States Air Force battle manager, and she has flown over 2,000 combat hours in the E3 AWACS platform as an evaluator, air surveillance officer, and weapons controller, as well as serving 2 deployments in support of operational Iraqi freedom as a joint interface control officer, lead Air Force surveillance officer, and weapons controller. She has been leading UNACORN from day one. I think that this is a really great way to start Innovate Connect, because this work is really an exemplar for folks to look at. So please, Rafi, if you could share with us Project UNACORN, I would really appreciate it. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Ms. Vidrine. I am so excited to be the inaugural briefer for this and to share what we've been doing with Project UNACORN. As everybody heard from my background, I have been doing data essentially since I was a baby AWACR way back in 2000, and I do honestly believe that data is our gold. So all of that will actually be sort of weaved through the discussion as I describe what we've been doing with Project UNACORN. Let's see. Open system preferences. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Got it.
Okay. How do I get? Do you guys see my briefing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to. Oops. Okay. So, as I stated, data and its availability is really the cornerstone of the naval digital transformation, as well as I believe for all of the joint services in DoD. The ability of us to be able to collect, expose pipeline, and be able to use that data for multiple different purposes is really the key of what we have built UNACORN off of. UNACORN, Universal Naval AI CORE Environment, was essentially the brain trust out of the CNO's guidance from 19, in which AI and ML were made a priority. Out of that guidance, there were 3 POM issues that were put forward. UNACORN was the issue that was really set out to help build the AI ML ecosystem. Because of the fact that there were already several DevSecOps initiatives underway, the one under Nick Chilean, who's now part of the Air Force team. There's one out of NIWC Pacific. I wanted to really focus on the piece that was most critical for the development of AI and ML to be able to rapidly develop in field. And that, I believe and truly believe, is the data piece. A lot of AI and ML is essentially developed based upon how good your data is. And the solutions that you get are based upon how good that data is, how easily accessible the data is, and whether or not it's in a usable form. So that's essentially the key of where we decided to build out UNACORN from. So we have collected a list of over 100 naval warfighting data sets that we've cataloged. And then luckily, Compact Fleet sort of gave us a scoping of that as to which data sets we would go after first. And I'll walk you through some of that. Some of the keys to that ecosystem were really developed out of what is directly in line with what the Department of the Navy CDO guidance is for exposability and usability of data for both warfighting and business enterprises. And that's based upon standards-based and common data operating environments. And we essentially just looked to what industry is doing, what the Googles, the Amazons, all of the big data brokers are doing, and we're heavily leveraging that capability. We did not want to put ourselves in a situation where we were vendor locked to one specific proprietary format that we were getting our data, pipelining our data into, and then having to pay one specific vendor to be able to use that data to develop analytics or AI/ML. So the key to that is how we have set up that AI ecosystem. So we are heavily leveraging open source capabilities. We have stringed together the components or the functions of that data engineering pipeline in an automated fashion so it can be operationalized and then monitored for the proficiency of the data pipeline and making sure that the data that's being pipelined through it has the right content, there's no errors, there's no missing data, really making sure that we can get the best product out of that data engineering pipeline. We have developed it so that it is leveraging the great capability that all the cloud brokers are rolling out, that elastic compute and storage that you need when you're really doing some heavy compute or training of models. But we did not want to lock ourselves into one specific cloud vendor or another. So we have designed the entire pipeline with that open source capabilities so that we can theoretically just lift and shift the entire pipeline from one cloud environment to another cloud environment. And because of the expeditionary nature of the naval forces, and I believe each of the services actually have that requirement for some of their platforms, we needed to make sure that we could lift the entire pipeline or pieces of the pipeline into edge devices so that we could really take advantage of that operational analytics at the edge, pipelining our data and feeding into analytics, AI, and ML at the edge because we are challenged with some bandwidth limitations when it comes to being afloat. So we essentially built it in that way, and then we, as I stated, we had collected and cataloged over 100 naval warfighting data sets. Compact Fleet gave us a scoping of specific data sets that they wanted to go after at the mock, but we really sat down with all the users and we actually mapped all of the workflows that are currently being done with humans in the loop to be able to take all the different stovepipe data sets that they're currently hand curating and hand managing and be able to understand the exact data to decision lineage so that we can target the specific pain points for the warfighters and really add that automated workflow data engineering pipeline to the process and be able to get better, faster results, getting more data in and getting the right data into the hands of the warfighter to make the right decisions at the right time. I just put this in because I know that a lot of times, probably not for this community, but for some other communities, data isn't what you would call sexy per se, but I wanted to show that I really do believe that it is the key to all of the underlying functional capabilities that we need to have as warfighters. So it really does feed that capability to execute in all the different domains, in the counter C4ISR&T, integrated fires, electronic warfare and management, cyber, strike, space. And the key to that we are really architecting with UNACORN is the exposability of all of those stovepipe data sets. So you can have exquisite data feeds that only one user can have access to. But if you're able to take those data feeds and expose them, pipeline them into a common format that everyone can use for either development or operational use, it really explodes the amount of capability that we can have. So that's what I tried to build, some type of pictorial that really speaks to feeding that warfighting capability. This is our reference architecture for that open source data engineering pipeline that I talked through. I just wanted to give this as an example to show that we are in fact heavily leveraging all of those open source capabilities to pipeline and put our data through an automated pipeline and string together for the different functions. It allows us to really do that ingest, cleaning, feature enhancement, analytics, exposability of the data. And then we, right now, based upon what we're leveraging from industry, are pipelining all of our data into Parquet, which is an awesome index capability that allows us to do that portability that to the edge that I talked about. It's super lightweight. If we're gonna do any fusion with other data sets or be able to rapidly search and pull out you know, little nuggets from the expanse of all the different data that we've pipelined and put into a data lake, it allows us to do that rapid search and pull out data with very low latency. So that was the technology that we selected to pipeline our data into for the entire data lake. We have worked with specific users that have different needs for what they're trying to develop their AI, ML, or algorithms for. So we do then take the Parquet and put it into relational databases or a MongoDB or other forms of the data based upon the use of the users. This is our overall roadmap. We are really trying, so we started with Compact Fleet as our initial use case. We've also been partnering with another project that has been implemented out of the Digital Warfare Office called Harbinger. I won't speak to their data set, but really working with them to try and leverage some additional techniques or different techniques than some of the techniques that we've been implementing for the data sets for compact fleet, and really trying to help implement that operationalization of the data engineering pipeline. So there are some data sets that do still require the subject matter experts to be able to provide the labeling and the identification of what it is, what the features are in the data set. But there are other parts of the pipeline that can then be rapidly automated to allow for faster processing of the data sets so that you can really expose the goodness. We're also partnering with PEO USC to do some additional undersea warfare data sets. And then we've also had conversations with several other agencies, Nav Air, PEO, IWS, and the C2 strike community to start looking at their additional data sets. We really think of this as a partnership between our data engineers as well as the subject matter experts and the warfighters to really be able to set up the data engineering pipelines, understand what the value is in each of the data sets, be able to pipeline the data so that you can use it for development of AI and ML and applications, and then also be able to use that same pipeline for operational capabilities. So we're in the process of building out sort of a more enterprise transition for UNACORN right now, and looking at that partnership between a baseline capability that the UNACORN team provides in partnership with those specific data domain users. Just some of our major accomplishments over the last year and a half. So as I mentioned, we really took a model-based systems engineering approach, and we sat down with all the warfighters in the boards, bureaus, and cells in the mock, and really did that mapping of the data to decision. We took those workflows and then built them into SysML so that they could be used by the rest of the community for development, as well as merged with a lot of the other model-based systems engineering efforts that are underway. We were able to build up an unclassed representative data lake with GeoInt, source track, METOC, order of battle, imagery, and be able to feed several different capabilities to include Maven Smart Systems, C2X, which is a C2 system, experimental C2 system that's being developed under the PMW 150, and also is looking to transition some of the battle management aids into the digital warfare platform that's being developed under the Digital Warfare Office and the Digital Integration Support Cell. We were able to feed SpotRGO, which does automated imagery recognition. All of these capabilities we were able to do because of taking all of those
Ms. Doyle, are you available? I think we just lost sound. Okay, everyone, please hold while we try and get Ms. Doyle back on the line. If you had any questions so far in her presentation, though, if you want to go ahead and ask them in the chat, we'll prepare them for when she gets back on.
There it is.
Okay.
It came back.
Oh,
Okay, it sounds like we may have gotten you back. Are you back on, Ms. Doyle? Okay, I don't hear any response.
are you guys hearing me?
Okay, now we can hear you, ma'am.
Okay. I apologize. Do you know where I left off? Which slide?
Could you pull them back up? I can tell you if I see them.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I was off like a bullet train and just kept going. Was it the major accomplishments, or was I on this notional enterprise roadmap?
I believe you were. Yeah, I believe you were on the notional enterprise roadmap.
Okay. So I just gave this as a depiction of the fact that we do have a roadmap, and that we essentially are envisioning UNACORN to be really a partnership between the data owners, the data subject matter experts, and our data engineering SMEs to really be able to extract all of the goodness from the data sets. We really need that partnership between the data engineers, the subject matter experts, and the warfighters to really understand what is the element of data, or what are those pieces of data that we really need to have to get into the hands of the warfighter. And it's really that partnership that allows us to do that, which is essentially the specific transition plan or roadmap that we have architected out, and that we're in the process of trying to get approved and rolled out. So just to highlight some of our major accomplishments over the last year and a half, as I stated, we really, we had that over 100 data sets that we had cataloged. Compact Fleet gave us that scoping of the data sets. We took that model-based systems engineering approach where we sat down with all of the warfighters in the boards, bureaus, and cells in the Maritime Operations Cell. We mapped out what the data to decision process was, and really tried to get at the core of what the key pain points were for the warfighters. We have taken all those workflows and put them into SysML so that they can be used for bigger naval architecture purposes and joint purposes. And then we identified unclassed representative data sets so that we could rapidly sort of do a proof of concept of our hypothesis that if we get these stovepipe data sets, we pipeline them into a common accessible format, then we could really feed capability. So that's exactly what we did in October of 2019. We were able to get over 170 terabytes of different data sets from GeoInt to air and maritime source tracking, meteorological data, order of battle, imagery. We took all of those data sets, we pipelined them into Parquet, and then we were able to feed them into multiple different systems. So we fed Maven Smart Systems, we fed C2X, which is a developmental C2 system being developed out of PMW 150 that's going to be feeding into the Battle Management Aids microservices architecture for the digital warfare platform. We fed Spot Geo and did convolutional neural net imagery recognitions at the edge. And then we were able to essentially provide all of this data to the warfighters to be able to use in their daily operations that they're currently doing in a very manual process. We then put the pedal to the metal and went after all of those actual TSSCI data sets. I will say that in terms of the data engineering pipeline, really acquisition of the data seems to be the hardest pain point. It's amazing what you find when you go to get data sets that have been in use for quite some time, just in terms of, translation from Oracle database to Little Indian, Big Indian, all kinds of interesting things that we find, but that are really critical because we do need to keep all of that gold and put it into more modern formats so that we can have access to it. So we have been really working hard to collect all of this TSSCI data sets, standing up our data lake under C2S, under a partnership with NGA, pipelining all of that data so that we can feed the mock capability at the TSSCI level. We did a demonstration of it running off of C2S in January, and then we are marching towards another demonstration in September. One of the requirements for compact fleet is that expeditionary capability. So we are really trying to proof out both the ability to pipeline, develop, and access operationally the data on the cloud, but then also be able to port specific foundational data sets that are needed into edge devices so that they can be leveraged by the fleet wherever they need them. So those are two of the big objectives that we're working with Compact Fleet for. I put this COVID-19 symptom tracker in here because we had what I would call a little excursion for the team, leveraging the capability that we've been building to support C5ISR for the mock, the same technologies, the same data engineering pipeline, Docker containers for rolling out rapid applications, databases, and analytics. We were able to, within 4 weeks of the request, take a cloud-native application that was being used to track symptoms of COVID, put it into Docker containers along with the MongoDB database and some analytics for the docs to be able to actually understand and map the trends of COVID. And we were able to put it on a snowball, put it through all the IA wickets of the STIG scans, everything else that you need to do to be compliant for DISA, and get it onto a ship within 4 weeks. So I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that's a record for getting something fielded for the Navy. So this is just an overarching schedule that I threw in here to show that we have several different partners that we're looking to work with. PEO, USC, we have a project that we're starting with ONR, our other sister project, Harbinger, that we're working with, and then looking to expand out that capability across the naval warfighting enterprise. I put a few extra slides in here just to show that process. Are you guys still hearing me?
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just want to make sure. I put in a few extra slides just to sort of articulate and show that user domain workflow decomposition that we did to really identify that, we just didn't haphazardly go after data sets. We really had a very focused and systems engineering process that we are following to make sure that we're identifying the right data sets to go after first. And then this is to show that parallel process that we did specific for rolling out capability to the PAC fleet mock. So that is all I have, and I will open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you very much. And we are going to read some of the questions off of the chat. If anybody else had any they want to enter into the chat, we'll read those first. So the first question we had is MBSE of MOC workflow sysml. Which MBS? A lot of acronyms there. Which MVMT tool did you use? Was it Cameo or No Magic?
So it is in Cameo, and it is, so the Navy has a MBC effort for the enterprise, in which we have a secret model-based systems engineering environment leveraging Teamwork Cloud, where we can share our models, and that's where we have uploaded our models to, so that they can be leveraged by the rest of the naval architecture community.
Okay, the next question was, given your data fusion, machine learning and derived analytics, are you employing MDM or master data management?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one?
Yeah, no problem. So given your data fusion, machine learning, and derived analytics, are you employing MDM or master data management?
So we are working with the different AI, ML, and algorithm developers, and taking Parquet and putting it into different forms that they may need. So it's, I would say, user developer specific. Does that make sense?
Yes, I believe so. If the person asking the question needs clarification, they can ask in the chat and we'll read that off too. We do have another question here, and that is, are the mentioned neural nets adaptive? In other words, ML-oriented, human-assisted neural nets, or object-oriented neural nets?
So they are convolutional neural nets developed under Progeny Systems for SPOT-RGO, and they are using object-oriented for identification of imagery.
Yeah, this is John McNary from Air Force 826 ISR. Thank you for the response. You just answered my questions very well. As far as the master data management is concerned, there's a lot of issues concerning, you know, the analytics and all of these neural net data sets that you're working on, right? Who has the master, right? Because we take derivatives of derivatives of derivatives, right? And
Right.
in the case of ISR, it's constantly changing. But keeping track of the different versions, keeping track of the pedigree, the lineage, is usually done under a function called master data management.
Okay, so we have essentially, we are taking the raw organic data sets. We have that copy that is CM'd in the data lake. We put it through the data engineering pipeline, and then have the Parquet version. And then those are what I would call like the authoritative data sets within the data lake. We then work with the additional data users to build, you know, if they need specific feature enhancements based upon the data or the question that they're asking, we will then build derivative data sets based upon their need, but that is then also CM'd, and it's not part of the it gets put back into the data lake, but it's not like the origination. And we're using the data tracking, data set tracking pedigree and provenance capability in NiFi to be able to do that CM over the data set.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and we have another question in the chat, and that was, did you get an authorization to test or an authorization to operate via cybersecurity? And do you have any RMF tips?
So we got a UDIATT, which was the fastest methodology to get an authority. And we did do a full SCA screening with the SCA team here at Nav War. So they did, in fact, look at all of our artifacts, all of our STIG scans, and really break apart the architecture. I hate to say that the biggest tip that I have is try to socialize your plan up and down the chain, be readily available to explain exactly what is in your architecture, what connections there are, who you're touching, all the security controls that are implemented. We really had like a full court press for about 3 weeks as we were really trying to finalize the actual kit itself, where we were socializing the architecture, all of that up and down the chain. And luckily we had, a 4-star request behind us that was helping to fuel that. But otherwise it's difficult.
Okay, that is all the questions we had in the chat right now. I think because we had a lot of call-in users, more than we were expecting, Ms. Mask is going to unmute callers. And if you have a question, go ahead and ask. Try and take some time and space it out, though, so we don't have too many people asking at once.
Hey, Rafi, this is Roland Figali. I'm the TD over at BMW 750. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Roland. How's it going?
Good, good. Thank you. A question on, you went through quite a bit of the tool itself, what it does, and all the wickets that you had to go through to get that approved. How would it have been different for you as a capability developer if the Naval Enterprise had an agreed-on process for a specific platform that you could develop on that had a pretty specific outlined method to get a continuous ATO, CTF? How, if that was already done at the enterprise level, what would reality look like for you from start to finish to get capability out there? Over.
So I believe it would have been a lot faster. I think we still have the process, though, where we're still having to provide the artifacts if it's something that's unique. But we did try to actually roll this out with very similar methodologies that I believe are being used by P1 as well as C2, C24. In terms of heavily leveraging the Docker containers, the pre-hardened Docker containers, doing all the STIGs and scans associated with them. If we had a pipeline that was set up that would have done all of that in an automated fashion for us, which I know is being implemented via P1 as well as C2, C24, I believe that it would have been faster.
Hey, ma'am.
Hello?
Yes. Are there any other questions? Okay. We'll give it just another second. If anybody has any other questions, last call before we move on to the next presenter. All right, well, Ms. Doyle, we very much appreciate this presentation. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And I want to go ahead and introduce our next presenter, Ms. I'm sorry, was there a question? Okay. Our next presenter is Mr. Warren Stahl. He is a Chief Data Scientist for the Air Force Counter Insider Threat Program with SAS CDMI. And since 2016, he has developed essential partnerships with many DoD agencies. Through these partnerships, the Insider Threat Program has helped define enterprise solutions for case management, data analytics, and business AI. Mr. Stahl has a combined 34 years of experience with the Air Force as an active duty military member, contractor, and government civilian. 25 of those years providing software development, project management, network engineering, cloud architecture, and counter insider threat capabilities for mission critical operations. Mr. Stahl, are you on the line?
I am.
All right, I believe we are ready for your presentation.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes, sir.
Okay, wonderful. Are you able to see my presentation as well?
I can. Could you make it any bigger?
I sure can.
Okay, that looks good to me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and it's great to be here presenting at this event. And I greatly appreciate Ms. Vadrine for hosting this event as well. My name is Warren Stahl. I've been with the Air Force Counter Insider Threat Program for about 4 years now. And I started off on the program as a senior technical advisor, and then was pulled in as we integrated over to another entity under staff CDM to become the chief data scientist. This program has been very interesting, to say the least. And so the briefing that I have today is about developing threat models using artificial intelligence. And we'll go to the next slide. There we go. So a little disclaimer, what we aren't. We're not here to predict crime. We are not Minority Report. There are a lot of legal and ethical implications to predicting human behavior. There's a lot of legal and ethical implications to leveraging data to identify risky behaviors and everything that goes behind that with regards to coming together to determine risk to the Air Force. There is very insufficient empirical evidence supporting the efficacy of this hypothesis. And we work towards looking at the program holistically and from a positive perspective. We don't have any authority to take action based on the information that's collected. What we do is we aggregate and analyze and refer. We'll refer to the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. We will refer our findings, if they're mandatory reportables, to the Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency, Defense Insider Threat Management Center, which is the DCSA DITMAC. Investigations are handed over to OSI or the security offices. If it's non-mandatory, it goes down to the commander, things like that. And we don't collect information currently on any individuals without prior written consent. So the SF-86 is the written consent that we work under. And we're currently looking to work with our legal department because DOD, OSD came out and actually expanded it to all people, not just cleared population. And again, we strive very much to focus on very positive outcomes. We're looking to get as left of the bang as possible to help airmen in the Air Force before they go much further in taking those negative steps that can hurt people's careers. So the biggest challenge here is you're very unlikely to solve a problem that you don't understand. You could certainly get lucky, and that's why we have our little monkey mascot there, the infinite monkey theorem, which basically states that you have a monkey hitting a bunch of keys randomly on a typewriter keyboard for an infinite amount of time. They're almost surely going to type in any given text, such as the complete works of William Shakespeare. So yeah, you bang at a problem long enough, you're going to figure it out. But we focus on trying to understand the problem set more than just trying to randomly go out there and pull data and trying to figure out exactly what we're looking for. That's why we're very lucky to be partnered with the Air Force Chief Data Office, which on my last slide I'll talk very extensively about our partnership with them and how they help our program. We, again, emphasize very positive impacts, and we're very aware of the negative perception that a program like this can have. We're not out to get anybody, and again, it's not Minority Report. And we do fall under Executive Order 13587, which was signed by President Obama in 2011. Our vision, the big takeaway here is, again, the affecting positive outcomes and to facilitate positive outcomes. We really want to help people as much as we can. So there's a huge human problem with data. If we look at the high impact events, you look at the Fort Hood, Navy Yard, Snowden, WikiLeaks, things like that, those events actually provide very few data points for research because they're statistically rare. They're very difficult to develop models against. So when the program first started out, they really focused on four things. They focused on suitability, which had been focused on for quite some time, obviously, with the security clearance programs. Subject to criminal investigation, actions resulting in security incidents, and revocation of clearances. So these four models were the models that a lot of entities started with and has since grown. I think our risk indicator list now has 12 different buckets with probably over 140 different risk indicators looked across those buckets. And so they did another study, which they correlated workplace homicide within DoD between 2009 and 2015, and they found that just on that model, that professional misconduct on the job issues and documented history of aggression were major players in all the events that occurred. So the idea is you build your models and you try to find some commonality to those models. But it gets complicated when you're actually trying to associate large volumes of data to represent those commonalities, and then risk scoring and various other things. And I have some references down below, so if you get a copy of the slides, there's one that I recommend there very highly from the CIA. It's the Shaw Theory Critical Path Approach for Personnel Predispositions for committing acts against their organizations. And we're going to cover that a bit here in the next slide. So this is a kind of an image of what Dr. Shaw has put out in his paper. And he talks about personal predispositions and stressors, how people deal with coping mechanisms, and how negative or positive organizational structure or things that happen within the organization actually contribute or mitigate to that individual's actions. These individuals that don't get help start showing concerning behaviors and end up becoming an insider threat. So to give you an example of this, while looking at this slide, we'll go way back in time in the 1700s. Benedict Arnold, he was an American-born senior officer of the British Army. He commanded an American Legion in the latter part of the Revolutionary War. And he was best known for his defection from the Continental Army to the British side during the conflict of 1780. At the time, General George Washington had given him his fullest trust and placed in him the command of West Point. And Arnold decided that he wanted to surrender West Point to the British forces, but the plot was discovered and he fled to the British lines. So when you think about Benedict Arnold, there's a lot of things that come to play. So going to the left, you're looking at personal predispositions. He was a daredevil, show off, got in lots of fights, arrested for assaults and disorderly conducts, committed smuggling, numerous personal and professional relationships with British officials, stressors. He had a lot of different deaths in his families, paternal alcoholism, crippling physical problems and war injuries, professional reversals, lawsuits, significant financial stress. And George Washington at the time was unaware of the depth of Arnold's disaffection and unconcerned about suspicious queries Arnold had made about American spies working against the British. And he concealed his communications and meetings with the British until ultimately he was revealed. His concerning behaviors that led up to that is insubordination. He wrote a letter to Congress that was very negative. He expressed feelings of victimization and insulting the members at his court-martials. He was very disgruntled, and he decided to act out, which is what he attempted to do when he was going to surrender West Point to the British forces. Luckily, he was not able to do that. So this is just kind of an example of a walkthrough of an individual who has personal predispositions and stressors, and how his organization contributed to some of that, and how he kept pushing further and further and further until he became that enemy of the state, that individual that would conduct espionage or sabotage on the system. So as you can see, the program itself, Counter Insider Threat Program, becomes very complicated when you look at all the different aspects of applying this and reading it in data. So a required solution, definitely, as it matures, needs all these inputs into the program. Things from the SSO offices, IP and security, from the medical community. We have to deal with HIPAA concerns. We do not access individuals' medical records. We are not authorized to do PHI. However, we do have medical liaisons that we can work with who can conduct those analysis and then provide us back a general synopsis of what they found and what their concerns are that aren't HIPAA protected. That may help us understand or better understand the behaviors that we're finding. We work with commanders, the inspector general, and we are maturing our program through public available information and public records and so forth. Academia, we work very closely with research and development. We currently work with the Army Analytics Group with their capabilities and stuff that they're developing. We've worked a lot with Carnegie Mellon and behavioral science experts and those that are developers of analytical tools in the industry. We work closely with the 16th Air Force in cybersecurity. We don't get involved necessarily with computer network defense, but we do cover down on what is called the CNSSD 504, which is user activity monitoring, which you can look at that. It's a document that is FOUO, so we won't talk about it here in this environment, but you're welcome to look that up. We do work with Air Force OSI. We have their agents embedded into our hub. Security forces, we work with them. In fact, we are in the process now of migrating over to their new system that we've had access to, their old system that retired. That gives us the ability to look at all the police reports and the police incidents that occur on every installation in the Air Force worldwide. And of course, we work with our HR community with personnel and activity in adverse data action. So operationalizing a solution like this, as I mentioned before, is very complicated. But we crawl, walk, run, and we work from left to right here. We try to keep everybody as far left as we can. As you can see, working with HR, security officers, those that are with their unit and the PAR programs, it helps get in front of the problems before they become to the far right, which is criminal investigative thresholds. We focus on positive coping mechanisms and trying to identify those individuals and help them. To give you an example of one, we had an individual that was contemplating suicide. They did this through an email up on a high side system. They sent an email to an individual. That individual that received that email did not take any action. Our system actually triggered on it, and we were able to contact that commander and inform him that there is a challenge here with this individual that is contemplating and actually outwardly focusing on suicide. So we were trying to get in front of that, working with the commanders and the mental health and so forth. And that person got help and was able to save that life and invoke positive coping mechanisms with the individual, with the experts in the fields. We don't do that ourselves. We refer. And if they get beyond that point and it becomes a criminal investigative threshold, obviously that's going to involve law enforcement, OSI. Sometimes it can involve the FBI and various other entities. But we're doing our best to keep it from going down that path. So, assessing data quality. A lot of this was talked about in the previous brief. Poor data quality is enemy number one. That is very true. You're able to get the wrong answers, even if you're asking the right questions. And there is biases in the behavioral patterns. Those can be of significant concern. So here we have supervised learning, which is one option that you can take. That is algorithms that learn from a labeled data set and provide a key. They provide us an answer key, and they evaluate the accuracy of the training data. The unsupervised aspect of it is unlabeled data sets that the algorithm tries to make sense of by looking for features and patterns on its own. As programs mature, moving towards those pattern-based capabilities is ideal. Pattern recognition and those models of the behavior, they can give indicators that our counter insider threat program is looking for, and get that in front of an analyst to make a decision or to work with liaisons like legal and law enforcement to determine whether it's something of no value or something of concerning value. Part of that goes in with pattern recognition. So with the data, we want to discover, transform, evaluate, and reveal. Within the discovery phase, we are looking at behaviors that are in data sources and how they map to PRIs, potential risk indicators. For example, declining performance could be something you look for in human resource data. Adverse financial status is something that is looked at under continuous evaluation. You want to transform that data because those behaviors come from many different data sources and could map to many different risk indicators. And by combining those together, you can build use cases. So for example, leave of absence, somebody have an antisocial compulsive behavior, high debt to income ratio, excessive large downloads. Maybe they get a hit on a use case for data exfiltration. Now, this doesn't mean that the individual is exfilling data. Just because somebody has leave of absence or high income debt ratios or has compulsive disorders, their excessive large downloads could be valid. It could be part of their mission, could be part of their job. Those are things that are very problematic in trying to automate, which we won't do in our program, where data and systems make decisions that people are doing things. We follow the breadcrumbs, and we're trying to put as much information and data that we found within data in front of our analysts, our threat and trend analysts, so that they can then conduct the research and work the folder to determine whether it becomes a case or not. In the evaluation process of that, there is a scoring and weighting factor, but again, it gets very complicated because if leave of absence is on a scale of 1 to 10 is 4, and high to debt income ratio is a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, together they may not be a 7, they might be a 10. The other thing to take into account is the geospatial focus. We tend to be able to generate reports within our program where we can determine over trend analysis that there's a gang problem on this base or that there's a drug problem on this base. and be able to report those findings up to our senior leadership, like up to SECAF, and they can then make decisions on where to invest and put funds to get ahead of those problems and get training and education and awareness programs out there that are surgically unique to those bases and the problems that are occurring on those bases. And of course, we want to reveal those behaviors and take it as a risk management approach. We always try to work highest risk first. Those that are mandatory reportables get sent to DITMAC because they meet certain thresholds. If they don't, they become, again, investigations with OSI if they give it 2 thumbs up, or they become a component reporting threshold down to the commander, or they become nothing at all. That happens quite a bit as well. So in quantifying uncertainty, this is a big problem. Building intelligent models requires that these models make rational decisions. But these decisions, they depend on the relative importance of the goals and the likelihood and the degree to which they will be achieved. We don't want to have a lot of false positives and ruin people's careers. That's not good. That is not the purpose of the program. We also don't want a lot of false negatives where people fall through the cracks and we end up having that active shooter, or we have that person who exfils data and gives it to their handler. Where we want to find is we want to get into that sweet spot, that true positive area. And that's easier said than done, but it can be because there is biases in data, and data quality can remain a problem. But we feel that confidence intervals, which proposes, you can calculate and propose a range of plausible values in an unknown parameter. And you hope that the true parameter is the proposed range, which is that true positive. But then as trend analysis occurs and you see more incidents, you get more things in front of your analysts and you get eyes on them. You're able to train and you're able to adjust fire on those systems that are helping bring those things to light that the analyst and the human needs to look at so that you can narrow in more on those true positives. So getting ahead of events, programs, there's a lot of insider threat programs out there. Every DoD component, there's 44 of them, has to stand up their own. There's the FBI, CIA, NSA, they all have to stand up their insider threat programs. Even contractor companies have to set up their own insider threat programs through their FSOs and through their processes with holding government contracts. There's really 2 ways to do this. The first way, which is recommended when you're first going about a problem set like this, is event-driven analytics. Yes, you're reactive. You're pulling data from user activity monitoring, information assurance, counterintelligence, law enforcement, human resources. So it's static data. Maybe you get this data in bulk drops, like every 30 days, every 2 weeks. You're not real time pulling the data, and you have to start finding those balances between risk and acceptable risk and available resources, and then using simple weight models to start trying to have those most concerning behaviors rise to the surface. And you typically do this with identified data with your analysts, so that and that can draw some bias. As a program matures, you can move over to a continuous evaluation program, and where you're more proactive, where you now have real-time feeds of those data, more dynamic data environments. You're still very susceptible to the biases in the data, you always are, and your models become more complex. But you also have the ability to automate the de-identification of that data, so you take away a lot of the biases that the human, the analyst, is looking at the behaviors could actually have based on the individual's last name, first name, their gender, their rank, various other data points. If you're able to pull those out of them and only focus on the behaviors, when those behaviors exceed a level of threshold, you can then re-identify that data because you're at a point where now that you need to know who that individual is. so that you can then collectively do the referral process or go through legal or go through the Office of Special Investigations and so forth. This is my last slide, and I'm going to spend some time here. This is a conceptual insider threat data analytic model, and we'll start from left to right. At a high level, the left side is all your data sources coming in. From that, you go into an event-driven rule-based analytic capability. And as your program matures, you move over into a continuous evaluation model where you're using learners and use cases off of big data reservoirs. And you're also tying into that enterprise data sources that, say, DoD provides many different enterprise data sources where your event-driven bucket over there, more to the left, is your Air Force unique data sources. Back on the data sources side, we've been working very closely. I think I've been working closely now for almost 2 years with the Air Force Chief Data Office. We had a 1-year contract with them that ended about a year ago, and then for the last year, we've been continuing to work with them. So we continue to partner with them. And our goal is to empower digital transformation and to convert enterprise data holdings into strategical assets. And through cross-cutting use cases, we're pathfinding ways to leverage the power of data as a foundation to artificial intelligence and machine learning, the right side of that model, and trying to enable faster decision-making and improving the warfighter support. The methodologies that the Air Force Chief Data Office developed for us was relational learning algorithms to discover primary foreign key relationships and unknown data structures, to be able to do behavior entity reconstruction. They architected a behavioral indicator-centric data structure to enable insider threat discovery. And through built fuzzy logic search engines, they were able to execute keyword searches, those lexicons, on all the tables and columns of a targeted data source. And from there, they were able to produce a potential risk indicator behavioral reconstruction of each of those entities, activities, and attributes. The results of that was very promising, actually. It allowed for rapid insider threat data discovery and transformation utility on Air Force data sources that we can quickly mine over for the relevance of insider threat discovery. So you take a data source, you don't even know what's in it, and you're able to run the logic that the Chief Data Office developed and designed. And based on our risk indicators, our keywords that we provide, which is our lexicons, our keyword analytic-based structure, and the taxonomy of that data itself, because if you look at law enforcement data, you know, they talk like cops. Their language is completely different than HR data. The word fired in law enforcement data could mean they fired a weapon, where fired in HR data means that they were let go. Two completely different meanings of the same word. And so being able to pivot on that and being able to work with the Air Force Chief Data Office on that was very, very important. We went through an objective data assessment framework with them, which provided, through data discovery and transformation utility, an objective and repeatable methodology to assess data for relevance to our mission set. Those data transformations that reconstruct the behavior profile of an airman provides critical data structures to enable insider threat investigations. That would actually be insider threat referrals that could become investigations. And incorporating intelligent automation and qualitative rigor to the insider threat referral and investigation process allows our hub to perform more comprehensive analysis in shorter timeframes and allowing us to keep up to speed with the data that's being generated. To give you an example, we probably get more than 20,000 records, behavior records a month just from HR data alone. And we have found that 9 to 12% of all data across the board is something that is considered a feasible or potential concerning behavior that needs to be looked at or needs to be racked and stacked with other behaviors to prioritize so that we're always focusing on the highest risk. Air Force Chief Data Office helped us build an enterprise platform requirement. And the approach was based on a rapid experimentation that aligns with the National Defense Strategy, and it ensured the requirements are informed by a comprehensive understanding of what our program requires and our limitations within the Air Force data. So without the Air Force Chief Data Office on that left side of the screen, our mission and our program would be left to our own demise to reach out and to discover and identify all those data owners, all those data stewards individually across the entire Air Force, which is exactly what the Air Force Chief Data Office is doing. They're building a dictionary of that. We would have had to reach out to them. We would have had to know they would have existed to begin with, and then build data sharing MOUs with them. And then we would have had to gone through the process of understanding the SORNs and whether we were able to access the data, which all this still needs to be done, but we can do it a lot more efficient because we would be going through all those steps before we would even know whether the data itself was a value to our program. By putting the Chief Data Office in front of us and running the algorithms and the fuzzy logic against our lexicons and feature sets of our mission set against those unknown data sources, we can quickly determine with the Chief Data Office whether or not that data source itself aligns well with our risk indicators and what we're looking for in the data, and whether or not it's something we want to operationalize. Why put an MOU in place? Why do all that signing? Why do all that analysis when you're going to find that the data itself is not even of value to your mission set? What's really powerful about this is we've been, and this is still being developed and worked out, but the ability to pivot what we've learned, what we've worked with the Chief Data Office team to actually expand that out to many other mission sets across the Air Force, not just the Counter Insider Threat Program, but other mission sets. And then to share that with the other Chief Data Offices of the Army, the Navy, the Marines, and others under the DoD to be able to duplicate that effort across DoD and implement that very effectively. So that obviously is not matured. It's in works. It's work in progress, and it does take time to get that moving. But the data sources they come into our capability, which is the event-driven rule-based analytic, which is organizational unique data. And as we talked about, we take those lexicons and feature sets and we rack and stack and determine highest risk. And we do this, again based on resource-driven capabilities. You can't find everything. It's just like network security. You're never going to catch everybody. But you have to be able to work with your senior leadership and define and draw that line of acceptable risk versus mitigated risk. Because senior leadership owns risk, we have to draw that picture for our senior leaders to give recommendations and guidance on where we draw acceptable risk for our program. And that's for any program and any mission. From there, the threat analysts would then work through the case. If it becomes a case, they would run it through the case management system, and then it would go through the process all the way, that green line at the bottom all the way to the right goes to mandatory reporting, case data sharing, so we share with all the other individuals that are using the DITMAC DSOS case management system for insider threat. as our program matures, and as I said, we were working with the Army Analytics Group and we're working with DITMAC on continuous evaluation capabilities. And don't confuse that with the continuous evaluation program that is for suitability of clearances. We do ingest their data, but we also take their data and merge it with lots of other data, as you've seen, to then build build those learners and those use cases, and be able to have that data inflow, go into a data reservoir, work with data scientists and trend analysis to fine-tune that, integrate that with enterprise data sources that are being provided at a much higher level to us. Continuous evaluation program, by the way, CE program, is an enterprise data source. So that is one of the data sources that we ingest. Other examples is travel, passport tracking, things like that could be enterprise data sources for traveling and whatnot. Because as part of suitability, there's a thing called unreported travel, and so that should be a behavior or a concern that we should be able to flag on from an enterprise data source. These events are detected with a much higher level of confidence because of the learners, because of the AI, and then those would feed again. Notice how they don't just get put into the mandatory reporting system for sharing that case. They come back to the hub into an analyst's hands, a threat analyst, to further work with the liaisons and the LNOs of the program, OSI and law enforcement and medical, before something becomes a case. It's considered a folder, a working folder. But once something does become a case, it does go down one of those paths, and a lot of times those end up going over to suitability, whether that individual's clearance is suspended or revoked. It could go down to the commander, where the command, like in the one example I provided for suicide, that the commander is actually intervening and trying to help that individual because they have cried out for help in the data that, in the email they sent or in chat or other methodologies that they have contemplated suicide. We don't focus a lot on suicide, but we trip on it, obviously. So it is one of our use cases. And so that is the overview of the conceptual insider threat analytics model. And that is my last slide. And I will take questions.
Okay, great. So we have a question from another platform that came in. So he wants to know, how is the information being disseminated to other services, such as using an MOU, or what processes are you using to send it out to other services?
Yeah, so we all, because everybody's mandated to use the DSOS case management system to report mandatory reportable thresholds to DITMAC and up through DCSA, the Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency. We all fall under that same SORN, and we have a letter on file with our A6 office that allows us to store our data. We're authorized to use that SORN, their ATOs, to store that data in that case system. And within that case system, we have the ability to send that up to DITMAC, and DITMAC has the ability to share that to other DoD entities. And that's how the information would get shared. We wouldn't share all the nuts and bolts of data like when you go back to our data sources, our raw data sources, we're not sharing those. We're not even sharing our lexicons and features and our findings there, and everything we do as that incident is, as those behaviors are considered a folder with the analyst, that's all internal. It only gets shared out when it becomes a case, and that's how we do it. We do it through that case management system. Now, we do have some entities that don't use the case management system. For some reason, the Defense Protective Service, DPS, the Pentagon does not. So we will still build the case in DSOS, and mandatories get sent to DITMAC. But if we have information to share with them, it would be done up on high-side networks using encrypted email to send them because it's shared risk is what we have to consider. You can have an individual with many different personas, and we have to correlate that. So you could have an individual that is a contractor who is an active duty reservist who works in the Pentagon when he's an active duty reservist. There are 3 entities right there that have shared risk: PISPA, Air Force, and contractor. So yes, there is definitely data sharing through that DCSA DITMAC system of systems capability.
Okay, the next question, and I just want to go ahead and remind you too, because I know we're on a completely unclassed network, so if you can't answer any questions, just go ahead and let me know.
Absolutely.
The next question is, how long can the information be stored?
So I would refer you to the NARA 5.6 guidance. And if you look up NARA 5.6 guidance, you will get that answer. That's my answer. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's great. The next question, how do you get your data independently validated, and who validates your model?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sorry if I was reading too fast. How do you get your data independently validated, and who validates the models?
Yes. So one of the things that we hope that working through the Air Force Chief Data Office and them running the initial lexicons and feature sets against data sources that we don't know about, that they will be a first step in validating that data is actually for our mission before we even make a decision to review it and look at it. Once we see that it's gotten past that step and that we feel that it is viable for our program, or potentially viable, because at that point we've not operationalized the data source, we will then start getting sample data, and we'll get an MOU in place. And from that sample data, we will use our threat and trend analyst, as well as our legal, as well as our other liaisons that we coordinate with, and the data owners themselves, to determine how that applies to the counter insider threat program. If the data source does not, or there's legal concerns, give you a great example. There is a legal system that the lawyers and that the courts use in the Air Force, AFGIS, which is the Air Force Adjudicated Information System, that we have yet to gain access to. And the main reason why we've not gained access to it is because it has client-attorney privilege information in it. So that is a great example of checks and balances that we have in play with regards to ensuring that the data meets our mission set. And what was the second half of that question again?
Who validates the models that you use?
Yeah, so who validates the models? We have our threat analysts, and our threat analysts actually validate the models. They're experts. Some of them come from OSI. Many of them come from other entities. They understand what we're looking for. The trend analysis that we do against our data also helps us tremendously with regards to validating the models. Those models have to be constantly tweaked. Anytime we get a new data source, if that data source has mappings to the risk indicators that are similar to what other data sources map to, which can then change the weight that you would put on that behavior, it then has to be revalidated. So this is all done before it would even be put into production. And there are many data sources that we're working with offline right now that we've not put into production because they've not been validated. But we still know that they are of great value to the program, and we're working. It's just work in progress of operationalizing data sources. But the models, it's a continuous process of validating the models.
Okay, the next question we have, has anyone considered your approach be applied to threat detection, remediation for warfighter operations, for example, defense cyber operations or offense cyber operations?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We have talked very closely with Cybercom. We've met with them. We've met with DIA. We've met with many, many agencies that have these different programs. And Cyber Command, a great example, they're very cyber-centric, obviously. They're looking at what people are doing on the networks and what data is going out and what data is coming into the networks. What they're not looking at are, and they do to some extent look at some of these things potentially because they do come across their desk, but they're not focused on the other behaviors, like what happens in human resources, what happens from a financial perspective, what happens from all the steps that make somebody suitable to hold a clearance. There's just the law enforcement issues, the medical side of it. There's just our program touches so many different aspects of it that although some of the capabilities and the base structures of what we've developed could be applied, they start to change drastically when you start looking at the data that will be ingested into those. So you're going to have different learners. You're going to have different weights and measurements and lexicons and features. So yeah, it starts going to. It's kind of like, I don't know, I guess it's kind of like a plane that is going from point A to point B and it's 1 degree off. You look like you're on target initially, but after a while, that plane is really off target. And that's what ends up happening as you look at applying this to different mission sets. They become their own thing, in my opinion.
Okay, so Ms. Mask has unmuted all of the callers. If you want to unmute yourself if you had questions, or if anybody online had any questions, you can unmute yourself on the computer by hitting the little microphone icon. We're going to open up the lines now if anybody had any questions they wanted to ask.
Hi, I have a question.
Hi there.
I'm wondering, what was the most challenging part of this program?
Without saying all of it? Wow. So I look at, because I'm a data scientist and I'm looking at everything from the technical and data science perspective, but I also sit in the program management office. So I see a lot of the perspectives from the program management side of it as well. So I think it's really hard to just narrow down just one challenging aspect of the program. I think it has buckets of challenges. Funding is a huge one because it's under an executive order. So we've had to work very closely with our leadership and our support from our senior leaders, working directly with the administrative assistant to the Secretary of the Air Force, Mr. Reardon, and Ms. Zarakowicz when she was there. They actually own this program. It's under SAP AA. So funding is a big thing, trying to fill those out years. Technology, everybody wants to chase the shiny object. And so you get hit with all these vendors and everybody else begging for your attention to try this tool, try that tool. Hey, we can do this, we can do that. And you really get overwhelmed by all of it. And you can't let yourself get overwhelmed by it because you're trying to stand up something that is operational, but at the same time, you need tools to do that. And you may find that the tools that you're initially set on don't become the tools that you need anymore, and you retire them as you mature. So you're now looking at different tools and capabilities. So I think a big challenge is trying to implement the capabilities. I believe that the behavior aspect of it is very, very complicated. I've worked closely with folks, again, like from Carnegie Mellon and from a university in California, where they've done studies on trying to weight and value behaviors. So trying to understand all that is very complicated. And then lastly, I think a very complex part of it is awareness, trying to help everyone in the Air Force understand that we're not a program that was stood up to go after them, that we're actually a program that was stood up to help them. If the further we can get left of the bang, the further we can stop someone from actually making that decision to steal data, or making that decision to sabotage that system, or making that decision to commit suicide. The program becomes more successful because we are protecting our resources, we're protecting our assets, and we're putting our people first. So trying to get that word out there has also been very, very complicated and very difficult as well. So I'm sorry, there's not just one, but I hope that kind of gives you some insight of some of our challenges.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
No other questions?
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, then I'd like to thank you, Mr. Stahl, very much for taking the time to present this with us today. We appreciate both of our speakers today. This was a very informative event, and I enjoyed listening in on it. Okay, and thank you all for joining. I'm going to go ahead and the chat section list myself and Ms. Mask's email address. If anybody has any questions or would like to get on a mailing list for future Innovation Connect events, we're going to start releasing this as a series where we're going to hope to have some cross-pollination across DoD with the innovative projects going on right now. If you want to email us, we will make sure that you're on the mailing list to be notified of future events. And thank you all for coming today, and that concludes our Innovation Connect.
Thank you so much.